Alright, here continuing the last part. I'll probably splice this into one video. So, but continuing, what were we talking about? Apparent acquittal. So the thing with apparent acquittal, apparent acquittal then has to do with what Tittarelli talks about concerning the influence. He's like, the law can't be influenced, but the judges can. But by explaining apparent acquittal, he has also thereby explained to Kay that influencing the judges means nothing. But as far as Kay had already known, and Kay has already realized that he's not being told anything new, really. He didn't know about these forms of acquittal, but what's being described is basically the court cannot be influenced, period. It doesn't matter. You may play this game at influencing it on the lower levels, but you only care about that if you're a superficial person. If you don't actually care about actual acquittal, then fine, you can throw the courts into a loop as much as you want, but that's not going to save you anything. All that does is it gets you caught up in the court anyways. You never become a free person. You're either stuck having to make all these acquittals, apparent acquittals, working on that, having these little moments of reprieve, and then going back into the process. Having these little moments of reprieve, and then going back to the process. That just doesn't seem like a good way to live. The other way, which is deferment, another translation is protraction. I prefer protraction. It sounds cooler. Yeah. More fit for what a court does, but a deferment's also fit for it. Which is basically what the lawyers seem to be doing. That you get caught up in the process, in the formality of the process, and the process itself does not move on. So you have a trial, and in personal issues this is more apparent. You have a trial, you say you have family issues. Deferment would be to engage a formality in which the problem doesn't move. It's there, it's ever present, but it never moves towards resolution. It doesn't get engaged as a problem, but it's a tension that remains tense and towards no resolution. So, instead of engaging the trial, just getting through with the trial itself, you're doing everything to keep it stalled. Instead of growing the fuck up, you're doing everything to not grow the fuck up by not even living a life that you even want. It's just like doing all these other things that just keep the thing from moving on as it should. Which is not a good thing either. Kay's already told, well, if you want to do that, all you got to do, you're just going to have to give the court a runaround, but that means that you're going to have to be constantly sucked into the trial because you have to be in constant contact with the courts. And it's not even a runaround. It's not exactly... what becomes clear is that in deferment, what you do is you play a social game where everybody knows what's supposed to be going on. But, you play nice with them, they play nice with you, and you all keep up appearances that the process is going somewhere. Now, I don't know why you would want to do that. It just seems like hell to me. All of this is a bad choice.
Yeah, it seems like, at least my guess, I would think the real choice would be to just submit and admit your guilt.
Yeah, he has already been told this. By one character. He was told this by Lenny. Lenny? I can't remember her name.
Lenny.
Yeah, Lenny.
It's like Lenin without the end.
So yeah. Now that a painter is the one who tells him this information is perfectly fitting. Because what are all these solutions? They're only apparent solutions. And what is a painter? A master of appearances. And why is it that the painter would be the one who would offer him assured apparent acquittal, what else could a master painter do? I mean, they are masters of appearances. Of course they would be the ones who would give you and could give you an apparent acquittal. But appearances are nothing in the end. So anyways, Kay is disappointed by his options. As he should be. I mean, this is one of the few times in which Kay does the right thing. That he understands these other options are just not real options. So why even bother with them? Now the thing about the paintings, moorland paintings. Now what is a moorland?
It's a land that Moors occupy.
It is a moor, yes. It is like a grassland.
Oh yeah, it's kind of a grassland.
Yeah, has not much vegetation, and if I recall, it had 2 trees.
Yeah, 2 sad-looking trees with a sunset behind and dark grass below.
Yeah.
Now, Josh, do you remember what that alludes to? Chapter 3, one of the books that he opens, there's an image in it.
Oh, I never went back to chapter 3, so I don't remember.
You should have. Okay, so I was going to explain it anyways, but fine. In chapter 3, one of the books that he opens when he goes into the courtroom to look at the judge's books, which he shouldn't have, but he did anyways. He was let, and he was allowed to by the washerwoman, the usher's wife. He looks at one of the books and he opens it up. And at first he just thinks that it's a pornographic picture, and then he's like, well, but this is a shitty pornographic picture, because then he starts describing it, and he says that the painter or the artist was not very good, that they didn't put in much detail, and that really, and like when you just looked at it, it didn't even look like anything lewd. It was just 2 naked people, a man and a woman, drawn in a very odd angle, which made it difficult for them to interact or look at each other from across a couch, and that they were this was like in a very faint outline kind of thing, not very detailed. It was more impressionistic, more something like less realistic. That image was obviously indicative of his case. What is part of Kay's problem in all of this? Kay keeps himself away from other people. What are the 2 trees symbolizing here? One of them is definitely Kay, and the other tree would be just probably could be a stand for anyone else Kay ever comes into contact with. But it's not really just Kay, because Kay would be a very specific one, because other people are trying to get close to Kay. But this is not just about Kay. This is even more universal than that. The 2 people, it's not just the one person not wanting to have contact with the others. It's a painting of human alienation. These 2 things are paintings of human alienation. This is part of what causes our trials. This is part of our trials, actually, that we keep each other away. We keep ourselves away from each other. We hide from each other who we really are. Afraid of each other for various reasons. Kay's afraid of his reputation. He's not afraid of being emotionally hurt or anything, or at least not immediately. He's not aware of that. But he's afraid that this will harm his reputation. That this will make him look weak. All these other things. And the fact that this one is trees, the first one is people, and this one is trees. To me, this would be a regression. It would be an intensification of the alienation. That Kay is increasingly becoming less human.
Vegetable man. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I see a strong connection between that first painting and these paintings. Don't know what you guys think.
Yeah. And Joachim and Boaz.
Now the
Deterioration.
now the thing about the three paintings that are the exact same. The fact that it's three has to be meaningful, but I'm not sure how. The fact that they're the same is clearly meaningful. The fact that the artist proclaims that they're different, or that they're set, but they're literally the same painting, as far as Kay describes them. Now, I think you could interpret this a few ways. Well, one of them is that, yet again, this is a sort of a mini test to see what Kay does in the face of something odd like this. He could have been honest with the guy and said, "You're selling me the same painting. What's it up with that?" Instead, he just shut up and took it. Mainly because he assumed that this was some kind of transaction. As if you remember, there's been a few times in which Kay treats his interactions with people, which are on a human level. Like, this guy was just trying to help him. He didn't ask him for money or anything. But Kay tries to make things into a transaction, a monetary transaction or some kind of other transaction, but a transaction nonetheless. So he puts it on himself. So this is a transaction. I'll pay him by buying these pictures, even though I don't want them. Blah blah blah. And I think this interpretation is true. It's one part. The other one is Titorelli himself mentions that not everybody's into gloomy landscapes, but he can tell that Kay is one of those people. And Kay goes, just doesn't say anything in regards to that. This is not the first time that Kay is being told that he's looking pretty down. That he seems to be having a sad life as of late, and other people feel sorry for him. But Kay doesn't recognize it. So the fact that these were the pictures offered to him and these are the pictures he accepts is symbolic of that. That they are the same painting, but may also be different. Could be interpreted in a few ways. One of them is that perhaps these are different paintings, but as we have already seen in many cases, and as we have seen even in this case, Kay projects himself onto everyone else. He projects the way he views people as the way they view him and view everyone else. So this would be represented in the fact that they are three paintings, they are different, but to Kay they all look the same. And they're all about the same subject, because insofar as Kay is alienated, if he projects that alienation to other people, they are alienated and appear alienated to him. So that's an interesting
Or with
one.
the thing in chapter 3, where he projected it to be pornography because he's lusty.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Someone did that to me today.
What was the other thing that I had to say about that? So they're the same. They're the same but different. So it might be just his monetization of the world, or homogenization of the world. Another thing would be that in being the same but in a different instance of repetition, these three paintings are themselves yet another representation of Kay's abstract alienation. They're different but the same, and they're the same but different. And the fact that they are indifferent in that sense also presents his own indifference, because As a matter of fact, so there's been so many times where K has mentioned that he's proud and that he thinks that he should be indifferent. He's proud of being indifferent. And he's being told and he's being warned that this indifference is part of his problem. This is part of his trial. Now, as for them being three, I don't know. I can't think of anything. There's got to be something meaningful there, but I can't think of it right now.
I'm sorry, what? The 3 paintings?
Yeah, the fact that they're three.
Well, he said he had many more. I think he was just getting the next one, and the next one, and the next one. If Kate's allowed him. I don't know that there's any significance in the fact that he gave only 3. But, 3 has a significance in almost every system. So.
Yeah, 3 is significant, but I think I agree with Hyperion that it's mostly just to illustrate how infinite is.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. It sort of feels like it's illustrating that. It's like, okay, the first time he hands him the same exact painting, like, okay, that's ridiculous. Then another time, it fully shows how absurd it is.
Could also be a representation of like third time's the charm. Third time he gets the message.
Maybe, but bad things always come in threes is another phrase.
I'll go with that one. that one is pretty good. That might be it.
One other thing that I found interesting was when the painter was describing absolute acquittal, Kay stops him and is like, "You're contradicting yourself." And maybe my brain is just rotted from too much Hegel, and I don't see contradictions as contradiction anymore. But I see the things he's saying, and they don't sound like contradictions to me.
No, I thought the same. I didn't think they were contradictions at all, even in the regular sense. So if we go back to it...
82.
He says, what sort of acquittal you want? There are 3 possibilities: absolute acquittal, apparent acquittal, deferment. Absolute acquittal is the best, of course, only there's nothing I can do to get that sort of outcome. I don't think there's anyone at all who could do anything to get an absolute acquittal. Probably the only thing that could do that is if the accused is innocent, and if you're innocent, it could actually be possible, and you could depend on your innocence alone. In that case, you won't need me or any kind of help. You're contradicting yourself, says K. You remarked earlier that the court cannot be approached with reasoned proofs. You later restrict this to the open court, and now you go as far as to say that an innocent man needs no assistance in court. That entails a contradiction. Yeah, I mean, if you look at this, there is no contradiction. The first one is about... the first one is about approaching the court with proofs. This is one thing. So you can't approach the court and influence it with reasoned proofs. You later restrict this to the open court, which is a qualification. It doesn't lead to a contradiction. And now you go as far as to say that an innocent man needs no assistance in court. So there's the first remark, which is you can't influence the court. The second remark, which is you can't influence the open court, but you can influence the court through the background. And the third is the influence doesn't even matter, because if you're innocent, you'll get out. There isn't really a contradiction there, unless you don't pay attention to the distinction of the levels, which is exactly what Titterelli points out to him. Like, we're talking about 2 different levels. There is no contradiction here.
Right.
In fact, the only contradictory thing is the rest of this chapter, which is the other acquittals are not ever really acquittals. So anybody who's like, oh, I want that kind of acquittal, well, you're an idiot, because it's not an acquittal, and it's very clear it's not an acquittal. And if you go like, oh, well, I understand I can't influence the actual court, which is the true court, which is always the higher court, but I can influence these lower people, and these lower people give me the appearance of acquitting me, but I know I'm never going to be acquitted. The contradiction then is not in anything Titorelli has said, or with the court, because Case mentions that he felt that in examining the words, he was not examining the words of the painter, but seeking out inconsistencies in the procedures of the court itself. But you can't game the court. The court sees through everything. And all this stuff about apparent acquittal and deferment doesn't fool the court, it fools you. So who's in contradiction? The defendant, not the court. So, yep.
There is a contradiction, especially with the second one that he talks about. The one where he's like, okay, you can influence the judges, but it can't be, you can't attain an absolute acquittal in that way. That would be a contradiction, because you can influence them to do what? To give you not an absolute acquittal. I mean, he doesn't understand this as a fundamental misunderstanding on Kay's part, but it is a contradiction from his perspective.
Okay, yeah, from the Case part of his perspective, it is a contradiction. Because I think Titorelli knows what he's saying, but Kay doesn't.
Right.
The thing is, and I think it ought to be clear now, there's a lot of judges. Like, there isn't really the judge of a case here. And it is described later on a bit more of how this process works. That a trial works through a giant distributed network of a lot of people observing a lot of things about this person, both directly and indirectly, and these things being immediate small judgments that are building up and building up and building up and concretizing into the final judgment. And it's no single person that gives this final judgment. The final judgment literally comes about through the defendant's actions, because as far as the court goes, the court doesn't seem to do anything except to, test the defendant, and the defendants decide their own test. I mean, like, a lot of what Kay has been tested on has been things he himself has put out there, and he's like, "Oh, I wouldn't lie, or I wouldn't bribe anybody, I wouldn't do this or that," and then he happens to engage in situations in which that's exactly what's being tested, and Kay even recognizes when he's being tested for some of these things, and he's like, "Aha, it's entrapment," and he's still dumb, and he still goes with it. So, influencing the judges isn't useless as far as I can tell. It's just useless if you misunderstand what the system is. Like, it's not you can't lie. You can lie to one judge, but you can't lie to all the judges, and you could definitely not lie to the court. So, the whole thing about being unable to influence, and that the influence is meaningless, is only if you do it under false pretenses. But if you're honest on the lower courts, you might still be condemned, but that doesn't matter, because it's the high court that gives the final verdict. So this is yet again one of those things in which, like, the process of, like, the legal process or its appearance thereof is not what matters here. And this is the mistake Kay's making.
Yeah, but Titorelli's also a liar. But he does tell a truth here. He says we're talking about two different things. There's what it says in the law, and there's what I know from my own experience. So those two are completely different things. We know that the law, if he's telling the truth here, and I think he is, that the law is not always going to work the way that it purports itself to work, you know? I mean, think about any holy text. There are always exceptions.
Yeah.
There are exceptions to every rule that has ever been uttered or, you know, supposedly placed as an absolute law.
Yeah. I mean, we're agreement on
this.
this. We're agreement on this. So this goes back to the whole thing about Job. An innocent man can be put on trial, and the trial can be heavy. So this is one of the cases in which the loss is one thing, but at least our experience says otherwise. Now, that's not necessarily a contradiction at all, especially when you look into the esoteric teachings about these things, about the nature of reality of God, and what this means. In certain interpretations, like for my own, for example, in my interpretation of what reality or God is, it is perfectly expected that on our immediate level experience, there would be a discongruence between what we perceive as justice and what actual justice is. And that there's nothing within the law that says that because you are innocent, you won't be put on trial. This is something interesting in like mystical literature, where in the East there's the whole idea of karma. Even the Hindus have this notion that to focus on karma, to ask like, why am I on trial? What did I do? Is in a way a mistaken question. That it doesn't matter because it could be possible that there's nothing you ever did. That what you're undergoing is not a punishment. It's not a consequence towards anything you've ever done. It's just a condition that you've been placed in. It's literally a trial just to try to see what you do under these conditions. It's not a punishment. It's not a tit for tat.
Yeah, it's like that famous, well, I don't know how famous it is, but I liked it. I heard it a couple places where there are two gurus, one sees a person, suffering and saying, oh, that person's suffering, they must have, done something to deserve this karma. And then the other guru says, what if it's your karma to witness their suffering and, you're on trial about whether or not you should help them,
Yeah, it's exactly that kind of thing. So,
right.
So in that sense, there is no disconnect between what the law says and what we see. They have a logical flow. It's just not an immediate one, and it would require that you. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, man. It's not immediate, and it's also not the particularities, like the minute details, seem to play into it a lot, like things that we wouldn't expect, I guess. Like you see one person doing something, like you said the other day with that story about the two prostitutes. You see one thing and you assume, they're equal, but, you may be unaware of others' tales. It's not just one thing, It's not like, oh, this person is this thing, this person is this thing, they're equivalent. So that's not... I mean, that's an aside. I don't think it has anything to do with this, but I just thought of it.
Right. So, to comment on... yeah, go ahead.
So a person like K, he's lying. He knows he's not innocent. But, a person that appears innocent and hasn't done anything wrong is not equivalent to a person who is innocent and, therefore could get an absolute acquittal or deserves an absolute acquittal, I guess. Who really doesn't need anyone's help or, his help or anybody else's help. But
yeah,
the fact that he's on trial and thinks he's innocent, isn't changing, and doesn't see his problems. That's evidence of his guilt. Therefore, he wasn't innocent.
Yeah, it seems like what it's all about, is that you can only be innocent by being guilty.
You're gonna have to elaborate that one.
Yeah, I mean, just in the basic sense of how do I put this? Just the fact that, like I was saying earlier, you have to submit, you have to understand and recognize your own guilt. That's the only way to overcome it.
Yes.
And part of that is also not just in recognizing your own guilt, but recognizing your own guilt in relation to others' guilt, so as to forgive them, and not to just blame them for their own guilt.
Sure.
Understanding their suffering, like you were saying with the two gurus. Someone else's suffering as being your own karma as well, not just their karma.
Yeah, you have to confront sin or your own sin or like temptation or whatever, and do the right thing. I guess would be the right way to phrase it, so it's not loaded.
No, yeah, and I think like the important thing there is that it's not recognizing, I did something bad. I recognize that, and I'm sorry. Like I knew it. Kay doesn't really know. It seems to me. He has the intimation, but he doesn't really explicitly know that what he's doing to people is wrong. He's literally that dense. But if he came to recognize that, in recognizing that he would have to, and then he would have no excuse to judge other people for the exact same things, because they too might not know, just like he did not know.
Right.
So in you taking on your guilt and recognizing you made a mistake, a genuine mistake, because this is why he feels like so persecuted. He's like, how could I be held guilty for something that or punished for something I didn't know was bad? Well, now that you know it's bad, and that you recognize you did it, and that you recognize that you didn't know before that, but now you do know, now you can recognize that other people probably don't know either. So how are you going to hold them accountable for what you yourself didn't want yourself to be held accountable to? Because it doesn't make any sense.
But his ignorance of the fact is probably the only thing saving him from being prosecuted, whatever that would mean. Like how you're not culpable once you don't, until you know the truth and refuse it, or whatever, It's in the Nag Hammadi library or whatever, some text. Where Yeshua ben Yosef, Jesus, says that.
I don't know, you're still guilty for, if you broke the law, you broke the law regardless of whether you knew there was a law or not.
Yes, but not on the karma, not in the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
On the spiritual level, if you don't know, then, you're not, God doesn't expect you to know everything,
Yep.
Fair, but tough but fair,
Yeah, and the thing is that, like for example, like I like Rudolf Steiner's series of, I forget if they're lectures or whatever. Like he wrote a book on like people's karmic lives. A lot of them, you read them and you're like, what the fuck? This doesn't even make any sense. Like you could be like a terrible person in one life, and in the next life, then there's like you die, you go to the spiritual realm, you kind of have like a in between moment. But in that realm, there's some stuff you learn and some stuff you don't. But there's some stuff that's locked in karmically for your next life. But when you come back, it is not obvious what the consequence of your karma is, because it's not mechanical. It's not tit for tat. For example, there's a guy. There's two. Actually, this one's great. For those of you who might find it interesting, the Karl Marx and Engels one. Mm-hmm. Apparently, in the prior lives, Steiner says, Karl Marx was a peasant, or not a peasant. He was like a landlord, but he wasn't like a big noble. And so was Engels, but Engels was a bigger noble. And they were in constant wars with each other. And eventually Engels overtook Marx's land, took everything away from him, and made him a peasant. And there was resentment for the rest of their life. Well, they die. So they spent some time in the spiritual realm. It's not clear to me because there's many things Steiner says that are just weird. It's not clear to me if they had any contact in the spiritual realm where they kind of worked some things out between each other, or whether they kind of went through these different spheres of the planets, and they kind of had a personal development of their spiritual, emotional selves. But either way, the next time they come back, they're born as Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, and this time they're not enemies, but they're great friends. And the reason Engels ends up being a benefactor to Marx is is as the karmic reaction or the karmic consequence for having taken everything away from Marx in the prior life. And the reason Marx hates rich people so much, according to Steiner, is precisely because he had everything stolen from him by a rich guy in the prior life as well. There's some other one in which some guy was some kind of warlord, and then he's born again, and he's an artist, and he's got a massive anger problem, but it only comes out when he drinks. But he loves to drink, and so he's kind of like a bum for most of his life, but he manages to get these benefactors who are rich people, who are much better people than he is, who manage to not only financially take care of him, but also end up being kind of his spiritual caretakers, in which they keep him away from the booze and from self-destructing for whenever he's in the partying mood, which is most of the time. So the point about that is just that the karma would be the example of the law, and the specifics of how they played out that law is their specific lives. If Steiner is right, then there is indeed no straight one-to-one generalization you could make of principles that you could deduce as you do this, and the law will require that. The law does not work that way. There is a logic to the law that is definite and determinate, but it's not our kind of logic, or at least it's not the logic of our material terms and our regular psychological terms. And I don't know where I was going with that, but it's just something I find interesting.
Well, that's a good point. If it did work that way, then, it would... Sorry, I heard a noise. There would be really no reason to the other realm. It would just be this realm.
Oh, yeah. The point was...
out everything here.
Yeah, the point was simply that everybody gets a trial. It's not clear whether the trial has anything to do with what you did before, whether you deserve that as some kind of specific trial, or if it's a fresh trial of you're just thrown into a situation in the world. So because you don't know that about your own case, you don't know that about other people's cases, it disarms you from It disarms you from having the right to judge other people, because you don't know what they know, you don't know what they experience, you don't know what's in their past, you don't know what's in your own past. So you don't actually know whether people deserve anything or not. And the best thing you can do is just be a good person, just be nice. That kind of reaches into... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it makes sense why, people like Kay get mad at this trial. They think it's unjust, they don't understand it. People get mad at God. They're like, why does all this suffering have to happen? If God's all-powerful and all good, why is there evil? They just don't understand. But it makes sense, why people who don't get it would be upset, mad about it.
Yep, but getting mad about it doesn't change it. What else was I going to say? Oh yeah, I mean, this connects a little bit to like the Kantian view of ethics, which is a pretty important point of ethics, really. That there is a sense in which like the actual details of execution aren't very important, because it matters that you know that you're doing the right thing or not. So for Kant, the question of like if imagine you're back in World War II and like for some reason you find that you're some kind of like a person out in the boonies of the German war, and for whatever reason Hitler was injured and ends up at your home, and no one else is around to help him. And Kant would say, well, the right thing to do is to help him. It's and you would say, oh well, Hitler's irredeemable, Hitler's a monster, and all these other things. That may be the case, but that's on Hitler. It's not on you. It may be the case that somebody else does deserve their trial. It does deserve, the harshness of their life. But it's not for you to judge. That's what it means. When Christians say, well, that's what it means in the Bible. When properly interpreted, because most Christians don't understand this. When it says, I can't judge. Only God can. The meaning is I don't know the circumstances, so I can't say what is proper to the circumstances of this person or not. I can't make myself the judge.
It's like exactly why consequentialism is stupid. Like, how is that going to be your method to judge how you should make actions? Like, how it will turn out? It's like not even helpful. It's like, you should do the thing that has the good consequence. Well, that's helpful. How am I supposed to know what consequence my action is going to have?
Yeah, I mean, Hegel himself also
you should have known when you helped that little boy that little boy was going to end up being Hitler. If you get what I mean, right? You help some little boy and he ends up being Hitler. You should have known that. It's like, yeah, great. It was a bad action because the consequence is bad.
Yeah, no, like consequentialism is just absolutely stupid, logically incoherent in its own
just practically
sense.
Not helpful.
So what else was there to say here? So we talked about these forms of acquittal, deferment. I wanted to say something about Titorelli's. What is it? Being a liar. I don't think anything he told Kay was a lie at all. It's strange. I think that when it said that Titorelli is a liar is, one, if you take him at face, which is what an artist does. An artist is a master of pure appearance. You'll fall for the lie. If Kay took him at face and he didn't look into the meaning of what he was saying, he would have taken the apparent acquittal. But luckily he saw through it and he didn't. So the offer for help, which is no help, is indeed a lie. But Titorelli kind of goes out of his way to make it pretty obvious that this is not a good option. It's not a real help. So in a way, Titorelli is a truthful liar, which is ironically what beauty also is. Beauty is truth in appearance, but it requires your judgment to be able to see that. It doesn't tell you itself. What it tells you itself, and it's so obvious, it's just bad art.
Do you think as the lawyers represent religion, that the painter is, organized religion, do you think the painter is supposed to just represent art as a whole?
I don't know that he's representing art. I think he's just representing superficiality, appearance as such. that this is the option of people who are superficial, purely superficial, and who don't pay attention to the deep consequences and meanings of what they're doing. I mean, because somebody completely superficial would have taken his thing, like, oh, you'll get me off scot-free? Thanks. And he's like, it's only a apparent acquittal, I'm telling you. But you'll be free after this. But if you pay attention to what it actually means, what he actually explains, obviously it's not an acquittal at all. Obviously it's not helpful.
Kind of like this book.
This whole book is just fucking perfect. Because it's exactly like that, you're right. This book is an appearance that is telling you that it's an appearance.
Now, is that meta art?
No, not really, because it never refers to itself. It implicitly does so in its actions. Layered. It's layered. It's like that sculpture of the man carving himself out of the block.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a truth about reality. It's a truth about the self. It's a truth about experience. But it's not talking about the nature of art itself, although you can obviously then extrapolate that truthfully towards the nature of art itself.
Right. His name is probably an appearance too. It's probably
Oh yeah.
an honor.
Yeah, the businessman notes this. He says he doesn't even know that Tittarelli is his actual name. That he's never asked whether it is a name or not. And I don't know if Tittarelli is kind of related to titillating, the word.
Maybe, but it wouldn't be in German. I don't know if it's the same name in German. I don't remember, but there's a.
Well, Tittarelli is Italian, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Italian. Sometimes they change names. I don't think they did because they have proof.
It makes me think of Tintoretto.
Yeah. It's just a beautiful, Italian flourishing name, like that.
Probably, it seems to me like you could coherently say all the things that we said about that name. They all come together. It all revolves very well around that concept, the concept of beauty as an ambivalent truth. Those who can see it, and those who fall for the appearance do not. But in this case, the appearance doesn't even lie. The appearance tells you exactly what it is, and it's just people don't believe it. Other interesting things. I mean, Tittarelli makes it clear that if K goes for the apparent acquittal thing, that he was kind of resentful that he's in the way that K is offloading his responsibility to prove that he is innocent onto Tittarelli, and therefore, forcing Tittarelli to put his name to the possibility of being tarnished.
Well, would you want your name applied or to be known for painting the same thing over and over and over again? The same poor picture?
Yep. Oh, that's a good thing. You just made me think of something.
Yeah. What?
Because the apparent acquittal is the exact same thing. He paints a portrait, verbally as this man is innocent, by his word.
Oh,
A judge buys the appearance. He goes through the process, gets out. The guy gets out, is indicted again, arrested again, and Tittarelli just does it again. He just paints the same portrait over and over again. Whoever comes to him is always innocent. Always gets, ends up probably getting off to some extent, but always coming back and having to play the same game over again. See, this is good art, people. This is not like stupid shit that an AI could generate, guaranteed. Like, you can't make something like this without being able to think.
What do the girls represent?
I mentioned it last time. I think
What's their
that
significance?
in general, the girls represent both a blunt innocence, that they see Kay for who he is, and they don't sugarcoat it. They tell him that he's a terrible, they say he's a horrible bloke. In another translation, they say he's ugly. The one who's a hunchback is explicitly very mean towards him. Doesn't seem to respect him at all. She kind of like elbows him when she first walks by him. The other ones, they don't want his portrait painted. Part of this, I think, is because it's an intimation that, well, obviously they don't think he's worthy of being painted by Tittarelli, because Tittarelli paints judges. And judges, are these higher beings, whom everybody keeps saying they're vain, but when they describe the paintings, I don't think they're paintings of vanity at all. And Tittarelli himself says, like, this is how the great judges of old were painted. This is like the big ones that matter. The presentation. And everybody keeps saying that they're vain because, like, oh, they don't really look at that. Like, well, that's not what art. Like, it's not about like what people physically look like. That art is about. Art is about presenting the truth. Like your physical appearance, just as merely given a physical, natural appearance, is not your truth at all. So when the judges are painted on, being on these thrones, on this motion of, halfway getting up, ready to give some kind of proclamation or judgment, that they are surrounded by a sort of halo showing their dignified importance and significance, and that behind them is the image of justice and victory in one, justice moving, which is also the image of the movement of the judgment as the trial proceeds. All of that is entirely true. And the way that the judges have comported themselves, as far as we can tell, as far as we have had direct interactions in the stories, not by second half mouth, but directly, they have been very nice. They have been very good people. Tittarelli's like, oh, these guys, you'd lose respect for them if they did what they did to me. And he has a very he has the back door right next to his bed where that one judge enters and crawls over him in the morning and wakes him up. And this, I do think, it's just like when Tittarelli says, pretends he doesn't like the girls. It's so obvious that he's lying. So when they say oh, Tittarelli's a liar, yeah, definitely. I mean, and he's probably lying about this judge too. He's acting like he doesn't like the court. He's acting like he doesn't like his job. He's acting like he doesn't like the place he's at. But all this is clearly a lie.
To what end?
To entrap a foolish man to see if he buys it.
Which does he? Has he?
So far he has.
He learns nothing.
Yeah, there's some significance to the oldest girl being a hunchback, having that deformity. I don't know what. I mean, one of them would be, well, she's still a child. Mm-hmm. There's still an innocence, but she's the one who's the rough one. Yeah, she's the one that's kind of the rough one. A hunchback would be and especially they don't seem to have any particular homies. Tittarelli says they belong to the court, so they're wards of the court. So to say, they don't have parents of usual. probably the closest thing to a parent is Titterelli. A hunchback may be like somebody with the weight of life at that point. It's not an easy life to be a ward of the state or the courts, for that matter. It's also just another thing of, I think, to see what Kay does, to see how Kay judges her for that. I mean, Kay definitely notes it. I forget what he says.
Well, if a hunchback were leering at me suggestively, I don't know how I would respond either.
Let's see, the girl, hardly 13 years old and somewhat hunchbacked, jabbed him with her elbow and looked at him sideways when he asked if a painter Titterelli lives there. Her youth and her bodily defects had done nothing to stop her being already quite depraved. She did not smile once, but looked at Kay earnestly with sharp, inquisitive eyes. Kay pretended not to notice her behavior and asked, "Do you know Titterelli the painter?" She nodded and asked in reply, "What do you want to see him for?" Kay thought it would be to his advantage quickly to find out something more about Titterelli. "I wanted to paint my portrait," he said. "Paint your portrait?" she asked, opening her mouth too wide and lightly hitting Kay with her hand as if he had said something extraordinarily surprising or clumsy. With both hands, she lifted her skirt, which was already very short, and as fast as she could, she ran off after the other girls, whose indistinct shouts lost themselves in the heights. Kate takes her to be depraved, but I don't see anything depraved about that. It's just kind of a tough girl. And she softens up. She softens up to him, like on him. After this, she still doesn't like act nice, but she doesn't hit him again.
She's like a yandere or whatever it's called.
I don't think I'd go that far. She doesn't seem to like him.
No, she does.
I mean, she kind of seems to find it amusing that he's going there to get his portrait painted, because I mean, her and all the other girls think that he's not worthy of being painted.
Yeah, if they're all interested. They're like saying that, they're putting on a face, and then they're like, oh, he's getting up. They're excited, they're giggling, they're screaming on the other side of the door.
Well, yeah, wouldn't you be doing that if like some fucking freak show comes and you're like, he wants to get their painting?
Yeah, but I wouldn't want to have sex with him.
They don't imply that she wants to have sex with him.
Oh, come on. She's leering at him. I mean, it's...
She gives him a
gross.
sideways glance.
In English, maybe. You don't know about the language of the body?
No, okay, like, where's this leering thing you're getting at? I'm not seeing it. Let's see, girl stumbled up, so behind others, asked her. Let's see, Kay followed them slowly, caught up with one of the girls who had stumbled and been left behind by the others, and asked her, as they went up by the side, "Is there a painter Titterelli who lives here?" The girl, hardly 13 years old and somewhat hunchbacked, jabbed him with her elbow and looked at him sideways. Her youth and her bodily defects had done nothing to stop her being already quite depraved.
Yeah, that's why he thinks it's depraved, because she's looking at him sideways, It's like, what the hell? Why are you looking at me like that?
Okay. Okay, I never caught that. Alright, that changes some things.
Okay, yeah, I won't get into it, yeah.
Okay, that definitely changes some of my interpretation. Doesn't change so much, but it adds on to it. So this is yet another one of those things, just like Kay's with Lenny, Kay's attracted to her deformity, but with this one, maybe the people of the court are attracted to people who are guilty. So this is normal part of the course. Once we know that they are part of the court, and they belong to the court specifically. But Kay's not attracted to her, which is good.
No,
otherwise he'd be a pedophile.
Right? Yeah. I mean, it's possible that they could be young prostitutes. I mean, as disgusting as it is, maybe that's why they thought he was here, That would make sense. Like, hey, you're here for this or whatever, And then, she lifts her skirt and then it runs off. It's already a short skirt. I mean, maybe she's just a schoolgirl or something,
Yeah, I was thinking, those skirts that are kind of like they have like those bloomer shorts or whatever. But let's see.
All their faces, even in this guard of honor, showed a mixture of childishness and depravity. I mean, it could be his misinterpretation, but I don't know.
But sure. This is ambivalent. I think it can be read both ways.
I mean, I assume literally every person in this is here to test him, in various ways. So that's just the way I took it when I read it.
But what would they? Maybe this depravity is not a physical depravity. It's not a material depravity. Maybe it's the kind of depravity of people who like to see people being opened up against their will, like Kay is with Tittarelli. Like he has to open up for a little bit as to what he's really there for and what his issue is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same kind of maybe it's the same kind of depravity that people have with somebody like Christian, for example. Like we like to pry into people's lives and just see how fucked up they are.
Like to be judgmental of them.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had not noticed that. Very interesting.
I mean, I could be wrong, but that's how I took it.
Yeah, I'll have to think about that more, but that is a very interesting thing. So I think that's it. We've gone over pretty much everything that's gone of importance that's gone on in this chapter.
Looks fucking genius.
It is. There's... when people say, I want a deep book, and they think that a deep book is about something that, they mentions, big names or whatnot. And, I want something, like name-dropping, philosophy or something.
Oh,
and, I want a philosophical book. To me, this is a philosophical story. It's not a story that presents itself as philosophy. Like a lot of Philip K. Dick books, stories, frankly, have too many sections where it's just straight up philosophy, and people are like, "Oh, it's such a deep thing." It's not hard to be deep when you stop being art. When when you go to something that's already explicitly deep, and you start going into theology and all these things, which Dick does. In this, it's masterful. He doesn't have to tell you anything about Kabbalah or Gnosticism or these things. It's there. It's up to you to find it, to uncover it. That's what makes a good work of art. It doesn't handhold you for it. It doesn't hide it. He's not hiding it. If it's once you know about it, you can see it obviously. If you're looking for it, you can see these things so obviously. And if you're paying attention, a lot of these things reveal themselves to you. But it's up to you to do it. That's what a deep book is. That's what a deep story is.
This, Moby Dick, Faust, Demons, or any other of the popular Dostoevsky books. They all do that.
Lilith.
Yeah, Lilith is pretty good. I like it.
The Voyage to Arcturus.
Voyage to Arcturus is really good. Even that one's a bit
It's a
more
bit-
like straight up philosophical and Gnostic.
Yeah.
But yes, we are like about 90. There's about 30 more pages, so we're somewhere about 70% done. All right, actually a bit more. So for those of you listening, hope you found this fascinating and entertaining and educational. We'll see you next time.
Take care.